Hello and welcome to the 2D RPG Kit Update 3.0 overview and tutorial video. For this video, I would like to go with you over the changes and additions that the new 3.0 update introduces. So as you can see, aside from some bug fixes and adjustments in the demo game, we have now added a shortcut to the UI prefab in the 2D RPG Kit menu, then a shortcut to rename the 2D RPG Kit folder without breaking the references to the prefabs for the context menus. The invincibility cheat inside the game manager is now divided into the two separate options for infinite HP and infinite SP. Next, the tile system now has parallax scrolling. In the game manager, you can now hold more than 3 party members. In this case, the system still only supports 3 members active at the same time, but you are now able to switch between more than the previous 3. So next is the improvement of the system to add these party members to your team, where you can make your character automatically disappear from the scene after joining you. We now also have UI messages for receiving items from NPCs, and if your inventory is full, you will get the full inventory message to make space in your inventory and then still be able to receive the item from the NPC. We can now also give items to NPCs. Next, we have dialog choices available, UI messages for completed quests. The player scale can also be changed through the common events component, as well as a new position for when changing scenes through the common events component. It is also now possible to change the player's appearance and replace the player status with a completely new one. Next, we can view skills description inside the menu and battles, and skills are now also usable in the menu outside of battles, which also means the introduction of healing skills. Then we have notifications during battles that show used attacks and skills, and also items. Enemies also now have visible HP bars, and you can create unwinnable battles. Next, we have the agility or speed attribute added to the character status, which introduces a new item to permanently raise a character's agility. Then we have status effects that can be applied to characters as well as enemies. These can be an increased or decreased strength, and of course increased or decreased defense. Then there is the poison status, which will deal damage at the beginning of each turn, and the silence status, which disables the usage of skills. And to inflict those status effects, we now also have several new skills that can lower the opponent's strength or defense temporarily during battles, and to inflict the poison or silence status effect. Another skill is then dedicated to cure those status effects. New items can also cause status effects. The strength and defense razor, for example, increase strength or defense during battles, and the elixir can cure debuffs, poison, and silence. Lastly, you can now assign types to your characters and enemies, as well as effectiveness to your skills in order to deal damage depending on the type of a character or enemy and the effectiveness of a skill. So now let's jump into Unity to see some of those new features in action and how to use them. Let's first talk about the 2D RPG Kit folder name. Previously, if you have changed this folder name, you would get errors when trying to access the prefabs inside the 2D RPG Kit context menu or even from the main menu up here. If you now want to rename this folder, simply go into the editor folder and open the Create Prefabs menu. Here you can change the RPG Kit folder name string to match the new name of the project folder. Next, we can take a look at the parallax scrolling effect for the tile map system. Let's open the template scene and expand the tile map. Here inside the background layer, if you take a look at the inspector, you will find the Parallax Effect script, where you can separately adjust the X and Y movement speed of the parallax effect. So let's quickly take a look at how this works. Let's first create a simple ground for the player to walk on the ground layer 1. This will do. And instead of drawing something for the background layer with the tile palette, we can simply drag this image into the layer and make it a child of the background layer. This will make the image affected by the parallax effect. Now resize the image a bit and drag it down. Next we need the player start. And if we hit play and walk along the road, we can see the parallax effect applied to the image. And you can also increase the X movement speed to make the effect more obvious. You of course don't have to use an image, this is just to quickly show an example of the effect working, so if you would like to draw up something in the background using the tile palette, that's of course also possible. Additionally, if one parallax layer is not enough for your game, you can simply duplicate the background layer and have multiple parallax layers inside your scene. Next, we can take a look at the game manager. Here it was previously not possible to hold more than 3 party members. Now you can have as many as your game requires. Just keep in mind that each character still needs to be assigned within the game manager, and that still no more than 3 should be active at the same time, as the game UI is set up to work with the max of 3 party members. Adding these party members is easily done via dialogs, for example. Let's put in an NPC, and if you scroll down in the inspector, you will find the options to add a new party member. Check this box here, and inside the party member to add, enter the index of the character that you like to add according to the game manager. So if you want to add party member 2, for example, you can see that counting the index 0, 1, 2, 3, that 2 is the correct index for this character. Now simply enter 2, and here you can decide if the NPC should disappear from the scene after joining your party. Let's try it out. So opening the menu, we can confirm that we currently have only one party member, and talking to this NPC who disappears after the dialogue, we can see that we now indeed have the second character in the party. And inside the game manager you can see that it is the one we chose with the index 2. Next we can also try out the dialog choices. Inside this NPC you can see 2 options for the dialog choices A and B that you can fill with any text you like. And inside the choice A and B you can assign different game objects to activate depending on the player choice. But first let us revert the add party member settings, and let's make the NPC give us a chest if we choose option A. And nothing if we choose option B. So for the options to work, let's first add an empty game object to the scene and call it Dialog Choice A. Next we want to spawn a chest, so let's bring in one into the scene and put it here as a child object. We would actually need to register the chest inside the chest manager and place an item here, but for the purpose of this demonstration it's not necessary. So next we need the second state of the NPC for when we have chosen to get the chest. Just duplicate the first one and put it here as the child object as well. In the dialog we can now simply say, enjoy the loot, and remove the dialog options. Now we can assign the dialog choice A object to choice A. And the NPC itself to choice B, so that nothing will happen and we can talk to this NPC again in case we choose this option. Finally, let's deactivate the dialog choice A, as the NPC will handle the activation for us depending on the dialog choices. And if we test now, we can talk to the NPC and see the 2 dialog options. Let's first choose option B and see that nothing happens as intended. And talking again, we can now try option A and receive the chest. And also confirm the new dialog. So this is how to use the dialog choices, and with this you can really do anything, not only make stuff appear, but also trigger certain events with the common event script component, for example, or even start different quests. Okay, so now let's go over to the player character. If you take a look at the player character prefab, you can see that this is a complete setup with its own animator that handles all animation states through Unity's blend tree. So if you now want to change, for example, the appearance of the player or replace him completely, we could go ahead and create a new folder containing the animator component and all the animations for another version of the player character. In this example, I have simply duplicated the existing player controller and replaced the animations with new ones. And lastly, created a new prefab. This one is simply an alternative version of the main character with a new hair color, but it should be enough for demonstrating how replacing the player works. The new player controller is also accordingly assigned here in the animator component, so if you want to trigger the new character during your game, we can simply put a common events component into the scene. Here inside the player prefab, we can check the replace player checkbox, and in the player animator, we can now assign the newly created player prefab. And what this will do is that it takes the animator of the original player character and replaces with the provided version. Okay, now let's quickly disable this component and start the test. So we are now starting out with the default player character, and if we enable the common events component, we will automatically trigger the new player. This works for a simple change of the player's appearance, so if we now check the menu, we will see that we still also have the character status of the default player. So if you want to completely replace the player along with the character status, we need to have that character status available inside the game manager and know the respective character index. I have prepared the new character status for the player with completely new stats as well as a fitting character portrait. So let's also remember that this character has the index of 3. And back to our common events component, we can simply enter the index of the character that we would like to replace the default one with. Okay, now let's test again and confirm once again that we have the default character status active. And now replacing the player, we can walk around and check the status to see that we now have a completely different main character active with his own character status and stats. So next we can check out what has changed in terms of skills. For one, we can now check the description of a skill inside the menu. This actually also means that we can use certain skills outside of battles directly from the menu. So let's create a small example by enabling another party member. And under the available skills, let's add the new skill that comes with the update, which is the heal skill. And in order to test the effect, let's reduce this character's HP to 1. And the menu, let's navigate to his skills and use the healing skill. So here we can now choose a character to use the skill on and restore his health. Now let's also test out battles that cannot be won by the player. In this case, for example, we still have the bad enemy from an earlier tutorial video that we can set up here to be unbeatable. So let's hit play, and to make it faster we can reduce the player's health to 1. And fighting the bat, we can already see another new feature, which is the HP bar above the enemy. And that we can see the skill's description during battles as well. So now, if the enemy defeats us, instead of going back into the game over scene, we will simply return to the overworld map. And the character's HP is restored to 1. So let's check what exactly is happening inside the enemy prefab. You now have different UI indicators for the newly added status effects and the HP bar, which you can disable here in the hierarchy if you don't want your enemies to show the HP bar. As already mentioned in the changelog, enemies and characters now can have different status effects, and these UI texts will indicate which ones are active. So you can inflict these status effects, for example, by using items such as the defense razor or the strength razor. And in this case, the item is a battle status modifier which raises strength of a character during battle, and the exact amount the strength is raised by is 5. So for a quick demonstration, let me put the strength razor into the player's inventory, and as already mentioned in the items tutorial, keep in mind that the spelling has to be correct for the system to recognize your item. Now let's go into the game and open the inventory and check out the strength razor. Of course, it doesn't make sense to raise the strength of a character outside of battles, so the item is not usable from here. So let's start the battle against the bat again and use the strength razor on the player character. So according to the UI, we successfully used the strength razor, and the indicator also says strength up, allowing for more damage when attacking. As for the other status effects, we can check them out on the enemy directly by expanding the enemy positions inside the active battle manager. And here on position 1 inside the prefab, we can scroll down to reveal the status effects information and see if the enemy's strength is either increased or decreased, and in this case, those values have their default numbers. And to immediately check the feature, we can now enable the poisoned and even the silenced checkbox. So now we can see here that the enemy is both poisoned and silenced. And the effect now is that the enemy will take poison damage and won't be able to attack us due to being silenced. And this can of course be applied to player characters as well, only that those status effects are displayed down here alongside the character status. So finally, I would like to show you how types and effectivenesses are working. Inside the characters prefab, or when you create your very own characters, you are now able to choose a type this character is based on. And in this example, the human characters are all of type normal, and you are free to assign any type you like. In the case of enemies, you can do the same and choose a type, like here, the bat is of type flying, but can have any type you assign to it. So now to create the effectiveness, you can go over to the skill creation inside the battle manager. Let's take a look at the available fire skill, which I have set up to deal strong damage against ground types, normal damage against all types, and weak damage against water types. Additionally, each skill can have effectiveness against multiple types. Now, if you want to add in more types, you can do that by opening the battle character script. And down here in the enum type, you can simply expand the list with your own types. Please also note that you would need to expand the same list inside the battle skill script as well. Just keep in mind that both lists should have the exact same ordering of types, as the system refers to their index in order to calculate strengths and weaknesses. One last thing to also remember is to not assign the none and all type to characters and enemies and use them only for skills, so that the skill can, for example, deal strong damage to no particular type or to all existing types. So with this, I conclude the 2D RPG Kit Update 3.0 overview and tutorial video. If you have any questions or anything is unclear, please simply drop a message here or over on the official 2D RPG Kit Discord server, where I try to respond to all your questions. You can find the link to the Discord server in the description of this video. So now, thanks a lot for watching, and if you want to stay updated with the kit or future projects, please consider subscribing.